Okay. So
Don't
today,
panic! Can we leave that
starting with an outtake is always great. So today we're looking to talk a little bit about with New Year coming up, looking at New Year's resolutions and looking at kind of the practical side and how we're going to do SMART goals, but also some of that intuitive kind of melding soul and that kind of thing, because actually we are spiritual beings and it's about melding those two things together. So that's what we're looking to talk about today. So I'm KATY-ROSE. I'm a teacher, motivator, and life redesigner. So my background is in neuroscience and cognitive therapy. And I now help people to understand kind of their personal power and sort of meld those two, sort of practicalities and the dreamers. Over to my colleague.
Hello. My name's Ayana, and Katie and I actually went to uni together and studied psychology. We both had an interest in human behaviour and how to help people reach their full potential. And we then ran a society together called Sussex Spiritual Society. So we both had that interest in psychology as well as spirituality and how to meld them together. I then went on to study nursing and working in healthcare. So what we want to talk about today is how do we meld all of those different aspects of ourselves, our soul self, our mental power of being able to set goals and put them into motion, our pure energy that we have to drive into creating, as well as that grounded action, really being able to put it all together. So I will pass back over to you, Katie.
Okay. So one of the things that I see in sort of life coaching and kind of habit formation is around New Year. So it's December, we're coming up to New Year's resolutions, New Year's Day, kind of planning for 2019. And I think that a lot of people know what resolutions perhaps they should be doing, should be aiming towards, but actually, unless you have some kind of alignment in what your values are, what you believe, what your kind of, I don't know, destiny, soul, purpose, whatever you want to call it, that kind of inner drive, unless that aligns, generally people don't tend to manage to succeed, shall we say, in those resolutions, or at least not for very long. So it is a little bit about melding kind of that, well, my life purpose, my soul purpose, my what I'm driven to do with, well, actually, what can I practically do in my life? And I think a lot of people, when they come to that kind of realization of their spirituality or their inner self, they kind of think, well, how do I do this without completely sort of losing all the progress I've done and uprooting the life that I've got now? So I think one of the things with New Year's resolutions is thinking about that kind of soul, that purpose, that drive. What is it that's flowed through your life? What kind of things have you had in common, I suppose? I mean, what do you think in terms of that soul's drive and how that might come out in terms of those resolutions, Ayana?
I think it shifts throughout your life, doesn't it, really? That sometimes you have a goal and a purpose and you work with the law of attraction and you think, oh, my goal and my purpose is to make loads of money, or I want this house, or I want this and that. And I watched The Secret the other day because I thought I haven't watched it in years, it'd be good to get a bit of motivation. And when I rewatched it, I almost didn't really resonate with it as much anymore, that it felt a little bit one-dimensional, and I realised how much depth we have of usually our soul purpose can be very different from what our mind thinks we want to manifest, and this will make us happy. Actually, what we want sometimes can be much deeper within us, that we actually really want interconnectedness. We really want to have this purpose that really helps people, that helps ourselves and gives us this sense of oneness with each other, and shared purpose and things. So I think that sometimes you can have a certain manifestation and you can use the tools and practices, and you can create with it. But then actually sometimes when you manifest that, you realize that's maybe not what you wanted. And it allows you to redirect your focus. So it's really useful having all of the tools and practices that we've learned over the years, all of the law of attraction practices and goal setting, all of these different visualization techniques and everything, and meditation techniques. But sometimes you have to really come back to yourself and have the courage to break down some of the old manifestations and life paths that are no longer working for you, to really make space and clarity within yourself to be able to recreate a new beginning. So as you said, it's kind of two different focuses. That your focus is how can we create a transition that is easier for people and less traumatic, whereas my focus in my life has always been very burn everything to the ground and start again.
Yeah, so best of both worlds.
Yeah, so how can we direct that that destructive focus of being able to really let things go, to make space to create, while also having that forward motion, that we don't just end up getting lost in that aspect of being lost and not knowing your focus.
Yeah, I think that's why one of the tools that I specifically focused on this year is journaling. And I think that you can start off with a bit of a prompt or a bit of an idea about what's going on for you, what you want it to look like, how you want things to sort of feel. But actually, as you go deeper and deeper, or as you return to that same thing week after week after week, it does change. The thing that you thought you want isn't what you actually want, or it doesn't quite resonate like it used to.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely a big part of it. So if you can find a tool that allows you to know to sort of get deeper, do deep work, however you want to call it, it can help you to guide your sort of future choices, but also on the other hand to look at where you've already been. And a lot of people who I work with, they feel like, oh well, I've wasted my time because I now know this isn't what I wanted. And actually there's some thread going through what you've done that is still valuable, that you follow, that is still going to be true. So all of my work is around building resilience, feeling well, being able to do things in a way that doesn't burn down the bridges, as it were, because that's how I've tackled things, and that's what I was sort of afraid of doing, and always wanted to kind of move forward at a slower pace, but was happy to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes when we're trying to get that balance, I suppose, between, well, how, you know, I want to make this change, but actually, doing it in different ways. It's about finding that thing that flows all the way through it. So I've always focused on the resilience, but with the well-being. And for me, that looks very different from how it looks for you, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit about finding the tools that allow you to go deeper and to reflect. So if you are someone, I think you know yourself as someone who, you know, okay, I'm going to burn that. I'm going to stop here. Chapter close. Chapter open. Whereas I'm more of a move over to a new scene, but still in the same chapter. And let's not get rid of any of this stuff I've edited out. Let's keep it for later.
Yeah. It's funny how there are so many aspects of our different ways of doing things which are polar opposites, and yet actually almost I need to learn more of the way that you do things, and you need to learn a little bit more of the way that I do things, and together we could be an unstoppable team.
Go team. Well, we have been an unstoppable team. But yeah, and I think particularly working with people who say, "Oh, well, I don't want the woo. Can we just have the practicality?" You know, I've come to you because you've got a master's in neuroscience and you've got training in cognitive therapy, and I go, that's all great, but you're not going to get the answer. Like, the whole of you is not science. The whole of you is not. You can't do it that way. And again, even thinking about people like Steve Jobs and Einstein and some of the people who we think of as being successful in a scientific, technological, practical field, they
Yeah.
meditated. They knew what they wanted. They designed their life. They kind of planned ahead. They reviewed their goals every month. They looked at values. Like, they did all this because actually, certainly in my view, you can't have one without the other.
Mm. Yeah.
Much like you say, I think it's about learning the other half. If you're one like us, a little bit on the edge, one way than the other, you've got to kind of learn to move towards the middle.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
something I've been struggling with over the years.
Mm. Yeah, I think that having that structure and something to help you to move forward day by day and to keep that focus and that discipline is really important. And I really struggle with it because I'm very floaty and flitty into different things. I'm like, oh, I'm interested in this and this and this, and I want to create that, but now I'm going in that direction. And I actually try to do. I bought The Artist's Way a couple of weeks ago, and as soon as I started doing it, I stopped doing it. So I had been writing the morning pages and doing some other things to do with it, and then as soon as I officially committed to doing it, I lost all interest and closed down my creativity. And she did write within it that it's almost like a fear of your own success and your own creativity, and something is blocking you underneath and things. So I'm just wondering how to basically have a structure and a moving forwards that isn't going to make people like me, who are very very changeable, something that we're able to work with, really.
Yeah, and I think one of the terms that's gotten a little more popular is something called a multipotentialite, or a multi-passionate person. And it's
Yeah.
people who either flit or they just have a lot of interest. So I remember my granddad asking me at the end of my masters, what would be your dream job? And I said, to work at the Hawke Conservancy. He said, you've got a psychology degree, a neuroscience degree. What? You haven't gone down the animal behaviour route. You haven't gone down the biology and zoology route. You haven't gone in. You haven't got any work experience in conservation. What? And it was just that idea of, I've never even questioned the fact that I like quantum physics and I like Reiki. Like, I've never questioned the fact that I've had multiple things. But I'm aware that for me, I haven't flitted from categories. I've fitted within a category. So I think, again, thinking about the values and the kind of that deep knowing. So I believe that we all have a bit of an inner fire. So as I say, mine is around well-being and around resilience, and that we all have more power than we realize. We're all stronger and more capable as human beings than we fully recognize day to day.
Yeah.
And I think that as long as I am following something on that thread, I feel like I'm in tune and I'm following my path, even if it looks really different. So one day I write young adult fantasy novels about talking birds. I've got a talking hawk. But what that story is doing is it's talking about how, as we grow older, we learn what our capabilities are, what resilience, how we can manage our emotions. That's told through a fiction story. And then a week later, I can be writing out an article with all the neuroscience background about capability and resilience and having mental well-being. And for me, those are two separate things, and I flip between them, and I might write 10 words of one and 10 words of the other, and then 3 days go past and I haven't touched either. But the thread that runs through it, that value, that inner fire, that drive and motivation for me is the same. So I think perhaps with those things where you're flitting, what is it you're seeking beneath the artist's way, beneath those morning pages, beneath the idea of doing it? What is it that you're actually seeking? Is it that, well, I just want to develop myself and grow in the best way for me? Is it, I want to be creative, but painting's not for me, so I'm going to try this? So I think a little bit it's about kind of questioning what value you're looking to get out of each thing you flit between, and seeing where there's a connection, because there's nothing wrong with flitting between the things. And it could be that in a year and a half's time, you reopen the artist's way and it's the right time for you.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes one of the things I'm always keen to say is that if something didn't work for you, it doesn't mean it won't ever work for you.
Yeah. Yeah, people change a lot throughout their lifetime. And I remember having, books that I'd had for years, and then suddenly they, like, I picked up the perfect book for me that resonated with me at this time that a couple of years earlier it wouldn't really have appealed to me. So it is interesting how you change throughout your lifetime and see things differently as well.
And it's like you were saying with The Secret. So I discovered The Secret in 2007, 2008. I discovered The Secret. I watched the movie multiple times. I went to university a few years later and watched it again. And I tried to watch it probably about a year ago and thought, it doesn't connect. I had the same sort of thing as you. Like, this is so superficial. Like, not superficial, but like it's one layered.
Yeah.
And I think that because I've gone down deeper, that it doesn't feel like it does. Whereas at the beginning, it was the perfect door opening for me because I was very averse to the woo when I was younger. I was very much science is the answer. So now that I understand the interconnection between, energy is quantum mechanics and things like that, it feels a lot easier to go deeper. But it doesn't mean that in 30 years' time, if I fall off this wagon, as it were, that won't be the perfect thing to bring me back into it.
Yeah, it's a good introduction. Yeah. When it comes to soul purpose, something that I found it quite interesting when I was writing my book proposal, that I did like a little introduction of me and what I was interested in. And as you said, sometimes there's this thread that goes along throughout your lifetime, that you can go down like really different pathways that almost don't look interconnected to outside people, but actually you're almost picking up different aspects of that mission to really unify it. And for me, my mission was to look at like the mind, body and spirit, to look at all of those different levels of health and human well-being, and how can you thrive on those very different levels and integrate them together. So it's interesting, as you said, even though I flitted into different aspects, I feel like there has been some driving force that has still brought me forwards, that has still guided me to some kind of unified goal that integrates all of those different things together. And you said yours was about thriving, like helping people to thrive and to feel their inner power and things.
Yeah, and I think it sounds, just from that description, it sounds like you're like the next step up from me in a way. So I'm about thriving on a day-to-day basis from I'm struggling a bit with my mental well-being or with day-to-day, and I can't think about the bigger picture. I have to just get through this month, whereas yours might be more of a longer term. How do we use our diet and our body for movement, and how do we use sort of the spirit and meditation? Whereas as a longer term, reaching kind of enlightenment and empowerment and things, whereas mine's more about the capability of dealing with what we've got to deal with every day. And I'm not saying there's no overlap, and I'm not saying that it won't stretch, but it sounds like we're almost have the similar drive, but we're at different points in the journey, or as how we see it and how we talk about it.
And again, like it's not in any way that I'm further on and you're less or anything. It actually is just totally different focus, which you can flip between very quickly. And when I have a very, very open focus where I see the big picture and everything, but actually I can get so bombarded and overwhelmed with information and trying to work out the meaning of life and how does everything fit together and how can I do everything when it's just me, that I end up not being able to actually function and do the day-to-day stuff at times because there's too much going on. So as you said, it's going back to balance and being able to unify both of those ways of seeing the world and come into the middle between all of them.
Definitely. And I think when you're trying to put this into practicality, thinking about habits and things you want to cultivate for the next year or whatever, one of I think it's James Clear who talks about systems versus habits. So talking a little less about, I want to, I don't know, lose weight in the new year, or I want to be someone who meditates for an hour a day. I want to be someone who has written a book. You know, there's kind of really end goal things, which is great to have, and it's fine. And you can break that down into, I want to lose this many pounds a week, or I want to, you know, I've written this many chapters a week, or however it is. But actually, if you have a system of, I'm going to work on my novel for 10 minutes a day. I'm going to meditate for 2 minutes 3 times a week, or 5 times a week. You know, that's 10 minutes a week. Across 52 weeks, that's lots. I'm not going to try and do the maths.
Large amount.
Lots. Like, it is a little bit about those baby steps do add up. But if we have a system, and I am certainly someone who, once I have a chain, I don't want to break it. So I did a writing challenge, where I wrote for, I think, 121 days in a row. And I got to sort of day 85 and thought, I don't fancy writing. Oh my goodness, I've got to start at 1 tomorrow if I don't write today.
Yeah.
And it just got me to write. And that particular goal was to write any word. I could write 1 word a day. That was my minimum. I could write as much or as little as I liked. And actually across that year I wrote loads, because actually that took the pressure off. But having that system, once a week I do this, once a day I do this, whenever I brush my teeth I do this, whenever I have a meal I do this. Having that system and building that system into your life, I found that people are much more likely to get to that end goal. And again, it's about implementing it slowly, but I do think a little bit of it is that kind of, the end goal, the big picture, versus the kind of more day to day. And I've certainly struggled with the in between. So I feel like I've got a view for where I want my life in 10 years, and I've got a view for around it next week. Ask me about next summer, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna be. So it's all about where we are, but also how we're thinking about it. And the more I journal, the more I meditate, the more I kind of explore those possibilities, because I am a self-seeker. I want to understand myself. I don't want to change the world, but I want to be the best I can be, and I know that will have an influence on the world. Then it kind of, those insights come out, as it were.
Just a question with what was it that I was formulating a question in my head that was to do with moving ahead, and no, it's gone, sorry.
All right, if it comes back, just interrupt me.
It'll come back to me.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about that kind of, so I call it your inner fire, your inner drive, your motivation. That's the kind of wording I use.
I just basically, I put it in your head and then you said it instead.
Oh, okay.
So I was just thinking, how do we integrate basically that emotion and that fire and that pure potential with the dedicated focus, as well as something that I've been struggling with at the moment is almost coming into a state of surrender. As I said at the beginning, sometimes I don't know what I want. And sometimes when I surrender, the most beautiful, amazing opportunities come to me that I wouldn't have thought of myself. I wouldn't have thought to myself, oh, there's this possibility of this line of action that is really what I want, but I wouldn't have thought to myself, I want it to be formulated in this way. So how do we both set a goal, have that emotion and that drive, but yet also leave it open, surrendered for the universe to surprise us? And I think part of that is sometimes, rather than setting just a thing of I want to be published, it's first going back to, I want to be happy, I want to experience bliss, and the raw emotions of what you want to feel, and then also putting them with certain goals. So I want to be an author that really inspires and uplifts people, and helps people remember their soul's power and how amazing they are. And so I think it's really important to both have that pure emotion, but also having some kind of focus of where you want to go, because I've been doing too much of the just having the raw power and the surrender, please surprise me, but then actually not knowing, like, nothing is manifesting.
Taking the action, I suppose, for that to happen.
Yeah, so we do need to take action ourselves as well.
Definitely. And I think two things come to mind. So one is Danielle Laporte, she wrote Firestarter Sessions, which is when I found her years ago. But she now does something called the Desire Map. And she does a Desire Map planner every year, and there's a new one coming out for 2019. And I'm not particularly into the Desire Map, and I don't know much about it, but what I read in Firestarter Sessions, which I know it's based on, is that, but rather than say she sat down New Year's Eve with her partner and said, I don't want to, rather than sit here and say, I want to go to Las Vegas this year on holiday, I want a new TV this year, they focused on values and desires. So how they wanted to feel, how they wanted the year to how they wanted to experience the year, and it was about values and desires and what they wanted and how it would look, how it would taste. So I think that's one thing that it never hurts to question that. Like, again, it's a little bit like, well, what's that going to do to help? We don't really know why, but the science does suggest that the more we envisage and design our life, the more likely we are to achieve it. We don't know the ins and outs of exactly why, perhaps. There are some neuroscience theories. But so one thing I think is that rather than fighting for, I want to be published, it's what is the feeling I'm looking for behind being published. So I want to teach. I can't help but teach. I can't help but talk about this stuff. And that fulfills me. That makes me feel like I'm a useful member of the community. It means that I'm ever learning, because actually when we journal, when we talk, when we listen, there are all times when we are processing those things in our heads. So I think when we're actually learning, and even if we're speaking, that's how they feel like the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else.
Yeah.
So I think the more that we kind of explore that, the more likely we are to embed it in ourselves. And when you talk about, how do we manage that thing, I think it's about being broad. So one of the exercises that I sort of suggest to people who are like, I don't know what I want my life to be like. I can follow my inner compass, but the map is empty. I don't know where to go. I don't know what direction. It's rather than picking, I want to get up that hill, it's I'm going to head north. So it doesn't matter, and you might hit northeast, northwest. Where you want to go might be northwest. But actually, if you stay still, you're no closer. North, you're not far off. And I think, again, it's about how do you want to feel, how do you want that to be. So The Secret gave the I am so happy and grateful now that exercise, where you talk about yourself in the future as if it's the present. So I'm happy and grateful now that I'm in a happy marriage with my husband. I have wonderful cats. I'm a published author, and I have won the lottery. I don't know. Maybe not that last one. And really feeling it, really living it, really experiencing it. And there's no harm in doing that. But I think that also helps you to feel what's right. So when I've tried doing that exercise in the past, I'm going, well, how do I want to feel? How do I want to be? I thought about, well, I want to be a published author, and feeling holding the book. And I realised I don't actually care about holding a book. What I care about is that someone says, oh my goodness, this was what I needed. Thank you for sharing. Whether that's a video, whether that's an audio, whether that's a book. This helped me. Okay, I've done my job then, because my job is to ensure that we all know this by the end of my lifespan, that actually we are more capable, and this is how we can access that strength and that capability. So I think a lot of people think of like mapping out their future as, oh, I need to do this and this and this, and I get a degree, and then I do this, and then I'll have kids, and then I'll have this car. And sometimes it is, like you say, want to be happy. I don't focus on happiness, because I feel like for me personally, I'm still, with my well-being, working out what that means for me and how that would look in a year's time, because for me that seems to change quite a lot. But that idea of feeling that I'm on track, feeling that I'm doing what I'm meant to do, that for me, it's that purpose side, is my drive. So that's my thing. But again, it's checking in with that. And it's possible that you can feel happy bouncing on a bouncy castle with some friends, as it is you standing on a podium with your new book talking about it on TV, and you could feel happy in both states. But sometimes that isn't enough to guide you as to which to take. I mean, I know which I'd pick. Bouncy castles are my favourite. But in terms of being happy, because I wouldn't feel anxious, I wouldn't feel any other stuff that I might feel with the other one. But it's a little bit about letting yourself be guided and listening. And very
Yeah.
much like you said, actually having that gap. So like I said about the journaling earlier, it's all very well to journal every day, but if you
Mm,
come back to that journal entry a month later and add
mm,
to it, something would have clicked.
mm,
It is through letting go and surrendering. Okay, I've got it on paper. I'm not going to forget it. I don't need to ruminate and overthink about this. I
mm.
can let it be.
Yeah.
Quite often, that's the time that we have those little bing insight moments.
Yeah. And often that's the hardest part for people, is the letting go part of it.
Yeah, which is why I have to write things down, because I'm so terrified of like losing them. But if I journal it, I've got it.
Mm,
Or if I put it in
yeah.
a Word document or I write it on Google Docs, we're in technology now.
Yeah.
It's not lost forever. But again, I can just
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was going through all of my old stuff, and the amount of journals that I have from over the years, that are just full of information. It's really interesting reading through some of the old stuff and seeing, um, as you said, like that common thread that is
Mm.
still going on. Like things that I wrote maybe 10 years ago, are still really relevant. I'll read something and think, wow, that's the perfect advice for me right this minute, actually. But then, as you said, you're always shifting and changing and seeing things with more depth and clarity than you did in the past as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's almost what we're craving, is that soul's drive forwards of, constantly learning who we are as a person. What am I capable of? What am I capable of doing and creating in the world and unearthing within myself? And that's always been my focus, is how can I take the outside experiences to learn more about who I am as a person and what I'm capable of and things. Um, and at the moment, I feel like there's a really big shift in the world from how can I have experiences of overcoming adversity, of going through like difficulties and things I don't want to experience but make me stronger,
Mm.
to actually getting to a point of, overcoming that, to be able to think, what do I really want to create in the world that, is going to make a really positive difference and is going to create ripples in the world and inspire people and inspire myself and things. Um, and sometimes you can't rush the really deep inner work, like the really difficult stuff, to get to that point of awareness, really.
No, definitely. And you've
Uh,
made me sorry.
that's okay.
You've made me think about, there's a book that I read and I can't think which book it is, but if I find it I will make mention of it somewhere. But there's a book that talked about two different types of learning, and one is through adversity, and one is through essentially taking action towards a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that we want the second one,
Mm,
but
yeah.
actually we don't know how to
Mm,
learn from it. So that was just something that came to mind. I thought I wish I could think what the book was called, but yeah, it talked about the two different types of we can learn from both.
yeah. And they can look really, really, like the same thing on the
Mm.
outside. Um, like the anti-war, versus pro-peace and
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
They can look very similar on the surface, but yet it's a totally different focus and a totally different manifestation. Um, and at the same time, just being in that positive state can actually go into a denial state where you actually aren't positively moving ahead, um, and not focusing on the, like seeing things with clarity that maybe you don't want to see, is actually just having the blinkers on and really not seeing
Mm.
things as they are. So again, it just comes back to balance, doesn't it? Really, everything comes back to balance.
Which is interesting because certainly in the self-development world, there's a lot of in people's in what's what I'm looking for, their thoughts on, they sort of have their own sort of ideas on whether balance exists or how it
Mm,
should look.
mm,
um, and I've certainly, so I talk a little bit about work-life balance. So a lot of people who come to me say, well, that's all well and good. I want to meditate more, but actually I've got kids, I've got work, I've got this, I've got that. I can't just shirk all my responsibilities. And I'm like, well, it's totally true. You can't, I'm not suggesting you should. But balance doesn't always mean equality. So if you had 8 hours of sleep, that might be considered in the Western culture to be somewhat healthy. If you ate for 8 hours a day, if you ate food for 8 hours a day, that would be considered a little bit excessive by most Western cultural standards. No comment on any personal practices people have here. And if you meditated for 8 hours a day versus 8 minutes a day, people have very different things on, well, that's okay, well, that's too short, well, that's too long, well, that's not enough. But actually, it doesn't mean equality. So, but again, if you only, slept for 8 minutes a day versus, it could be balanced for you as 8 hours of sleep, 8 minutes meditation, an hour of eating.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't mean they're equal. So I think a lot of times, particularly when people have a particular passion project, so they want to start their business, they want to get their book off the ground, they want to start, I don't know, start going back to school, studying something new again, they feel like, well, how am I going to find 2.5 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week to do this without losing the 3 hours a week with my kids that I specifically spend on their bedtime or whatever in half-hour chunks. And it's like, you don't, you can still pursue something 10 minutes a day or literally cut out 1 hour on a Sunday morning if you need to have a solid chunk, because some people again work, it's about knowing yourself. So I don't work very well in 3 hour blocks. Yes, some people get into flow and then they don't want to get out of flow. I can't do that. I can do 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, 10 minutes of that, 10 minutes of that, 5 minutes of that. My husband will game for 8 hours and not notice that he's not eaten or drunk anything. I game for about 35 minutes and my arm starts aching. I start feeling like it doesn't matter how good the game is. I have to just sit down and just blink and go up and get a tea, and so it's about knowing yourself so that you can make it as easy as possible. Like, why would you make things more difficult? Why would you follow someone else's, I won't wear someone else's clothes that don't fit me, but we follow all the self-development, self-improvement. This is how you sleep 101, this is how you make your life better, without necessarily knowing what does and doesn't work for us. And when things don't work, we feel like we're a failure, when actually we're learning what works for us. Actually, painting's not for me, I'm going to try drawing.
And everyone is so different as well, so unique, that sometimes what works for one person isn't going to work for someone else. Like for me, if I go to bed at a certain time, get up at a certain time and things, and I have a certain routine, after a very short amount of time it just doesn't work for me, and I feel trapped, and my energy levels change throughout the month and stuff as well. So for me, I've created more of a lifestyle of myself, for myself, that's allowed me to flow and to be able to do things depending on what feels right for me at the time. Maybe, sometimes waking up really early in the morning, I just feel like for a few weeks I'm really not resonating with that. So I'll work a night shift instead, and I'll feel more in flow for doing that. And then sometimes I'll feel like I really need a bit of groundedness somewhere. And then after a while I feel like, I'm starting to get a bit stuck again. How do I flow a bit more? And sometimes I'll have like a mini trip away, like a long weekend, and that will make a massive difference of getting me back in that state of equilibrium again. So I think it's really important to know yourself and what you value and what really helps you to feel at your best, and to have the guts to create that life for yourself. That people will tell you in their their jobs, in their lifestyles, the way that they live life, people will tell you this is how you're supposed to do it, and sometimes will guilt you into, oh, you should be doing things this way. Maybe like other generations will tell you you're supposed to get married at this point, you're supposed to be doing this, doing that, and that that lifestyle and that trajectory worked really well for them. But only you know yourself and what you value and what feels really uplifting to you. So you really need to just go with what really resonates with you and not be swayed to try and settle. I think.
And I think the point you make there is brilliant, in that actually when we talk about balance, something I've started to realise is what we mean is flow.
Yeah.
You mentioned flow a lot
Yeah.
there, and I think that's something we don't want. Again, we don't want balance. We want everything to feel like it's not so hard. Why is it so hard to exist and to do something we want to do? You know, you come home from work, I've got an hour before I have to go and do whatever, that I'm not sitting there creating and drawing and colouring and all the things that I feel I should and I wanted to as a kid, and I want to get back into it. Why does it feel so hard? And I think it is about flow and actually looking for flow. So in terms of that, again, that practicality, and you asked a little bit earlier about, well, how do you, when you've got quite a broad idea, how do you make those resolutions that are going to work for you? How do you balance that long term view with short term? It's about, well, what does feel like flow? What does it feel like to be free? What does freedom? What would feel like this is the right thing for me? It's never a wrong question to ask. You can't always make what you want happen, but knowing, like you said, that kind of self-knowledge, it gives you a little bit of inner power. It gives you a bit of, I can't currently change this. I'm at my day job. I can't just leave, until my lunch break or whatever. But actually, I know what I want to do next, and I know what works for me. And that can give you a tremendous sense of just capability and being able to control yourself and your inner environment, which sometimes is all we need when we're just lacking that confidence.
Yeah.
And when you think of sort of soul purpose, I mean, what sort of things come to mind for you? Because I'm aware that in my mind, soul purpose is something that is quite woo, for lack of a better term. It's one of those things that people mention. And yet I talk about like an inner fire, and I think of it as a scientific motivation, dopamine pathways, all of this. But can you tell me a little bit more about that sort of soul purpose and what that means, what you've discovered? Because I think it's something you've been looking at quite a lot over your path.
Yeah, I think for me that soul purpose and that soul drive goes beyond it goes beyond goal setting and words and how do I create this and things. And the same as you said, it starts off with this inner fire, just this feeling of just pure potential, pure energy in your body that really feels like I want to create, with this like amazing drive, like this energy wants to create something really amazing and beautiful and inspiring. And a lot of people have kind of pushed that down. They don't even know what it feels like because they've dampened that inner fire to try and fit in. Because our society at times doesn't necessarily actually respect that fire. That actually is quite almost dangerous in a way. Like in the past, like women have been burned at the stake and things for actually having that drive and that fire and that confidence in themselves that moves them forwards. So we have this block in ourselves that we've been conditioned into us of we shouldn't speak out and speak our inner fire and create with it because it's dangerous to do that. And what I'm feeling at the moment is, how do we reawaken that spark in people that is so full of just natural joy and passion, like when you're a child and you just think that you just want to shine your light and radiate it to everyone. How do we reawaken that within ourselves and shine it and create with it? And the funny thing is, sometimes you can get that first point of reawakening that fire within you, but then it's, how do I channel that into creativity without then all of the practicalities dragging it back down and putting out the fire again, really. And with my I'm going to go into my awakening journey a little bit that I hadn't talked about at the beginning. So with my like very scientific focus and things, I then had this huge awakening where I felt this inner fire just totally awaken within me and wanting to express itself. And within that time, I wrote huge amounts of poetry, like 10,000 words of poetry within a couple of months and things. So when you've awakened that inner fire within yourself, you can create a huge amount with it if you're able to create the space within yourself to allow it to work through you and to express through you. Which is what in the artist's way she was talking about, was almost becoming this clarity and this grace for your inner fire to speak through you and to create. So I feel like that's a really, really important part of the creating process. When it comes to different elements and things, if you have too much of one or the other, then it doesn't create something. Like fire needs air to give it the power to run forwards with. And if you don't give your passion all of those different elements it needs to coax that fire and to move forwards with it, then it will just go out again. It won't. It will be a spark within you, but it will just be hidden.
It'll be embers.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to hear you talk about that kind of awakening, because for me, I haven't had like a spiritual awakening, but I noticed as I grew up, I got really angry and I got really passionate about things, and it all came down to this my way of processing things and my way of trying to understand what I was feeling. And I went down the practical scientific route, so dopamine channels, motivation, all that kind of stuff in neural pathways, etc. But realistically, what it is that I've always kind of fought for this shouldn't be so hard. When I was young, I got depressed and anxious, and I was like, this shouldn't be so hard. Why is this so difficult? And people didn't really talk about it, or there weren't many options available. And I just ended up diving through myself and self-help books and trying to find a path through. And in hindsight, I had my awakening somewhere back there. I could not pinpoint it. So when people talk about their spiritual sort of awakenings and reawakenings, I'm kind of like, oh, that's really interesting, because I don't have a point. But what I can do is I can look back and go, somewhere in there, that spark lit. And that spark became a fire, and then it became a forest fire. And, now I'm burning. And it's really interesting, again, thinking about, actually, there's nothing wrong with me having a slightly different experience. It doesn't mean that my fire is less valid or smaller, or or vice versa with yours. But actually, what matters is that we're putting that fire and that motivation and that purpose into practice, and we are either slowly or or at a greater speed, or in different ways, putting it into practice and sharing it with people. And I was thinking about Rise Sister Rise by Rebecca Campbell, and Women Rise, Wild Women Rising. I think it's another book that's come out this year. And we're obviously going through this period of time where people are suddenly recognizing it, talking about it more, being more open. And I think that's brilliant, because I think there might be an 11-year-old out there who's experiencing what I was experiencing at 11, when everyone was thinking, you're too young to be having these teenage tantrum type of things. But actually, there was something clicking, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to go with it. I didn't know how to practically manage it on a realistic level, I guess. And again, it's about balancing that, because equally, what I found was, energy healing's not realistic, or blah, 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 it's not scientific, it's not real, it's not proven. Actually, that shuts down a massive amount of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what can have meaning for you. And again, you're only getting half the picture. So I think we're going to start bringing this to a close. If you have any last questions.
I could literally talk all day. I love
Yeah.
it.
If you're watching this video and you like it and you want more, let us know, because we do this. We've been doing this for years. We just thought today, should we video this?
Yeah.
But in terms of that that inner soul purpose, that inner fire, however you want to word it, actually the important thing is for you to know yourself. And we are not taught those skills. So what frustrates me is that we are not taught about managing our negative thoughts in schools and stuff. We're not taught about healthy relationships particularly very well. We're not taught about energy and things like that. We're not taught about when you have a craving for sugar, what it means is this. We're not taught about half the things that work for us, and that the different things that we can try. So I think that's one of the things in terms of when you're thinking about the new year and resolutions and how if you want to change your life or have a life reset. The one message I think I want people to know is that you have the power in you, and it's okay that you don't know what that is yet, because we're not taught this. Like we've been doing this, we've been searching for it for over 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's my kind of input on New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, we're never going to get there. It's something that I found really useful is it's not, life isn't about an end point of once you get there, that's it, and you're happy and you're successful and that's the end of it. But actually life is about, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but life is the journey. And constantly recalibrating, recreating yourself, re-experiencing, seeing things with more depth and clarity, and finding new avenues of experience that keep you feeling fulfilled in your life throughout the years. That reminds you of how many different aspects there are of you and how multidimensional you are and how amazing you are on so many different levels as well. So yeah, I think mine's, I guess my depth of what I believe in and I want to see in people and see in myself is the same as yours, is to really see people knowing themselves deeply, knowing who they are authentically. And it's okay to not know all aspects of yourself, but to support yourself in learning who you are as a person and making it a fun experience, really. And yeah, seeing the adventure of if we can work with this energy within this soul purpose, this light that really wants to explore through us, what can we create this year with that? So I'll be interested to see what people come up with.
Exactly. So what sort of things come to mind for people in terms of, we're coming up to the new year, or perhaps if you're watching this, it's June, I don't know. But actually in terms of when you're making change, when you're thinking about self-improvement, self-development, knowing yourself, growth, whatever you want to call it, what are the things that, what questions do you have? What kind of things battle it out? So as I say, we've talked a little bit about that kind of melding the science with the soul, melding that kind of woo with the kind of more practical side. So yeah, let us know kind of what thoughts you have and things. And if you want to hear more, let us know about that as well. And there'll be links to kind of connect with us in the description.
And do you want to talk about your course that you're doing as well?
So I have a course called Map Your 2019. It will probably have a slightly different name throughout the year, just because 2019 will end at some point. And it's a little bit about melding that kind of practicality and that kind of, well, how do I do the goal setting and how do I actually make this work in my life with what do I really want? What is the direction I want to head in? How do I read my inner compass? How do I map that out? And again, there'll be links in the description if you're interested in that with all the details.
And what kind of tasks and things are you going to be following throughout that? Is there going to be like webinars, or are there going to be some ebooks and some questions set, like goal setting, homework and things? what kind of things are you going to be doing throughout that process?
So each week there's a worksheet and a video lesson, and then there is a some form of community. So I've done it with kind of Facebook group or with kind of a comment page, that sort of thing. So it's one of those things where you can kind of share as much as you want, but you're not alone in the process.
Yeah.
And it is worksheets with some a bit sort of intuitive, so it might be a journal prompt. But to me, a journal prompt doesn't have to be writing it out for 20 minutes. It can be drawing a picture, it can be doodling on a post-it note, it can be kind of singing and noticing what feelings come up when you sing a certain song. So it's not quite the traditional sense, but it is a little bit of those kind of practical smart goal setting. Some CBT techniques, a little bit around kind of building that motivation, understanding why we struggle with sort of well-being sometimes when things come up. And then balancing it with some level of kind of meditation and mindfulness, and some of the slightly less scientific things, but ones that from experience seem to get really good results.
And is it 7 weeks it's over?
Yeah, so 7 weeks. So I picked that because it's not too long that you're kind of 6 months in and going, my life I'm so behind. Life has taken over, but it's not too short that you're kind of a week in and then like bye, and you've got to last the whole year without anything. And it's that little first step. It's finding those, fine-tuning those first baby steps. Actually, I want to make 2019 better than 2018.
Yeah.
Or I want to make this month better than last month. What can I do practically, but also not miss out on all of that inner emotion, that soul that is driving me to change.
Yeah. And throughout that, you brought up quite an interesting point as well, which we haven't talked about, is, as you said, having that group focus as well as working with you over a number of weeks creates that sense of like the amplification of having a number of people working on that same manifestation and going through that process together, and also you being what's the word, someone witnessing your process, that almost keeps you on track because you know that you want to show them the progress that you've made.
It's that accountability.
That's the word.
I knew it. I was like, it's that accountability, but also I think it's that lack of feeling alone. So the amount of people who get to week 3 of the new year and they've fallen off the wagon. The first time they've done 3 weeks of the gym and it's perfect, and then they miss a day, and they think, oh, I've missed it. And I think having that first 7 weeks, so it's nearly 2 months, it is just that takes you right through to kind of first couple of months is enough for you to put into practice, to learn, to explore it, to see other people fail and get back up. As well as then feeling motivated to get back up yourself, because if you fall off the wagon, there's no reason you can't walk up the road rather than laying in the ditch for like another year.
Exactly.
So
as you said, I think it's something like over a month is enough time to set up habits that keep you going. So it's a really good process to do something for at least a month to be able to really solidify that into your life going forwards.
And I think the thing with habits is that it's very difficult for us to put a time frame on it, because a habit could be to stop smoking. 30 days, if you've smoked for 20 years, 30 days is not going to be enough to completely eradicate that. So it really depends on the complexity of the habit, the length, but 30 days is probably the minimum for most habits. Of things like changing your diet, changing your routine in terms of how often you go to the gym, and that kind of thing. So it's definitely using a little bit of the science there in terms of it does take time, but actually having people to go along with you, you're much more likely to get there in the end.
And I found that when I did that Hay House conference, having a whole group of people that were working towards the same goal, and talking to each other in the group was really, really powerful actually. And seeing how everyone blossomed together was really, really amazing. Like that shared intention and energy of moving forwards together made a huge difference that I just wouldn't have been able to have achieved by myself as well. So I think really doing it with other people makes a huge difference, actually.
Yeah, and we know that one of the things, so I write stories, and actually one of the things that you look for if you are writing fiction is progress. So you want the character to grow, you want their story arc is some sense of progress.
Mm,
And even if there's if there are obstacles coming up, what you want is for the main character to overcome those obstacles or go around them. The same's
yeah.
true of us. If I see that my friend has overcome something really difficult, it
Mm,
makes me feel like we as a species are so much more capable. And if she could do that, could I do this?
yeah.
And I think that if we're going through those journeys together and we're learning how to map out kind of what we're doing next
Mm,
together and learning the skills and what works for them and what doesn't work for them and seeing it, it really helps us to accept where we are. And I
mm,
think that's very difficult when you hit the end of January and you're not that perfect person you wanted to be because it's only been 4 weeks and you've been doing this for 30 years and it's going to take a bit longer to actually get to the end. As
yeah.
you say, there's no end. We never reach the horizon. The further you walk, the further the horizon gets. But,
Yeah.
you know, so
But having that momentum that keeps you going, keeps you moving forwards, is really important, isn't it?
definitely. But, well,
Well,
thanks for watching if you made it this far. And
yeah.
we will speak to you soon, as we said. Put your comments down below. Any thoughts, questions? You know, what are your plans for 2019? How are you going to put, you know, what's the most useful thing you've got from this video that you're going to think about implementing when you next decide to make a change?
Mm.
And we'll see you again soon.